Posik Tes. This is in the process what Yaakov Avinu gave to his sons prior to his gestaltings. At the beginning of the chapter, in Aleph, then we find that Vayiko Yaakov el Bano Vayechi, and he said to them, Heosfu v'agidu lachem Eish asher yikro eschem be'achas hayomim. Yaakov Avinu said to his sons that they should gather around him, and he will tell them, and he will reveal to them what's going to happen to them ba'achris hayomim. That means in the end of days, normally, the expression achris hayomim. And so therefore Rashi brings that Yaakov Avinu, when he said to them, I will tell you what's going to happen ba'achris hayomim, that Yaakov Avinu bikesh legales SHK. He wanted, no, you must sit in, I don't want people sitting over there. Well, you might shift. I don't want you both, you have to sit in. You have to find a place. Come on, don't get moving. It'll take half an hour to absorb a brief thing like that. So, written that Yaakov Avinu bikesh legales SHK. That Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal to his sons the end of days. The SHK. So normally when we say the word kates, then b'derech klal, in the words of our sages, the word kates means put yourself on the table. We don't want any drawing room poses, okay? You lean over and you look at the safe appropriately on the table. The word kates means the kates, the end of days, the coming of Moshiach. And there's a whole discussion here. I mean, they hadn't even gone into the Golos of Mitzrayim yet, so what shayach the whole union of Moshiach? But that's a whole big question all in its own right. However, suffice it to say that Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal to them like the end of days, if we learn it b'pashtus. And Rashi says that nistalchu mimenu Shechina, that the Shechina withdrew from Yaakov Avinu when he had that desire to reveal to them the end of days. And he started to say other things. In other words, that when he felt that the Shechina withdrew from him at the moment of his will to reveal the kates, then he began to say other things, implying that these other things, they would assist that the Shekhinah remain with him. And then immediately following that, we find he begins with all the blessings that he gave to sons. So now we need to understand whether the intention at a Chumash and all the Pesukim that follow are purely blessings that Yaakov Avinu said to his sons, or whether they're a lot more than that, but they're a form of different nevuahs that Yaakov had, prophecies that Yaakov Avinu said in reference to all that would be important for his sons from that moment that he gave them the blessing until the end of days. But just at the actual end of days per se, the kates he wasn't able to reveal to them. But it could be that the kavanah was that these things, that even though many of them contain blessings, it wasn't the purpose to say that Yaakov Avinu, instead of revealing the kates, he decided to bless them. No, Yaakov Avinu said Dvarim achirim, other inyonim. But those other inyonim are similar to what he began with. In other words, he wanted to reveal to them things which could only be known through prophecy. And therefore the case is for sure only known by prophecy. And so when he saw that that particular prophecy wasn't desired by the Eibush at that particular moment, and therefore he moved into other inyonim of prophecy, what he saw that didn't drive away the Shekhinah. Even though we'll see that he does talk about inyonim in these other prophecies, which have to do with the inyan of the Keitz Hayomim, but not actually revealing the detailed time of the Keitz. And even though these inyonim involve also brachas, they're like foretelling of certain great things that will come positively upon the Shvatim, on the tribes. And then at the end of the whole thing, then it's written that Yaakov Avinu, that the Chumash sums up the things that he said as brachas. And he was ish kibir chosei beirach, each one according to his blessings. But if we look carefully in even those psukim over there, it's not necessary to say that the whole thing was only blessings. That when he saw that it didn't go with the Keitz, then he went over to blessings. And when he saw that it didn't go revealing the Keitz, then he went over to saying other matters of prophecy and other matters of telling into the future, like the union of the Keitz, involving also possibilities. He would give blessings that would be positive prophecies, which would be similar to the concept of blessing. And therefore it's written at the end of the parsha that he blessed them, each one according to the blessing that was due to them. Ish kibir chosei beirach beisam, that he blessed them, each one according to his blessing. So Chassidus says that means that there was some blessing hidden, Lamaila, that all Yaakov Avinu had to do was get at it and bring it down. Not that he made up the blessings, but he brought down what was already prepared in a good way in heaven for the Shvatim, and he brought it down and revealed it to them. Didn't it? I don't like having to turn my back to see people. Anyway, it's so Lefizeh, we could say that what Rashi is maramed, that he began to say other things. He began to say in Yonim which are similar to that what he really began with. What did he begin with? Bikish legales SHK. He wanted to tell the end of days. He wanted to reveal what would be the finality of the whole creation, as it were, including the life of the Shvatim and their descendants in the generations to come. Not just blessings to them personally, that's according to all opinions. So on the basis of that, let's take a look at one of the particular statements that he made to his son Yehuda. That's what we're going to begin now. I'm sorry, it's not a Posik Test, it's Posik Chef. That he begins to state what he has to say to Yehuda. Now, Yehuda was the fourth son of Yaakov. His Bucher was Reuven, and then there was Shimon and Levi, and then there was Yehuda. So Yaakov mentioned Reuven, and then Shimon and Levi, he was a little bit difficult with them. He didn't treat them so lightly. But without going into all the details, but to get to that. And then he gets to Yehuda. Yehuda ato yoiducha achercha. Yodcha be'irach oyevecha. Ishtachavu lecha b'nei avicha. Yehuda, you, whatever that, the Mefoshim did some word. Why did he have to say Yehuda, you? I was pointing at him saying, oh, you. Which is puzzling. We don't find that very often in the scripture, but we're not going to deal with that in this class. Yehuda ato yoiducha achercha, your brothers will all literally admit to you or bow down to you or give you They will all give you, how do you call it, hoid, according to some people. They'll give you splendor. You'll always be victorious over your enemies, because you'll have your hand over their neck, literally. And all of the other brothers will all have to some way or another bow down to you. Gur Aryeh Yehuda. Yehuda is how do you call it, a lion cub, a small young lion. Miteref B'ni Alisa. Rashi learns that was referring to what they did with Yosef, was like, tearing him apart somewhat. And they also said to Yaakov that they'd been torn by a wild animal. And then Korah Rovach Ki'ariyeh, but later he's going to be like a lion. He's going to lie down and bend over like a lion. Ukalovi, and a lovi is a female lion. Mi Kimeno. Who's going to be able to stand him up? As well known, a lion, when it's had its full, food, if it's attacked something, then it lies down and it doesn't stand up for anybody. You can. I remember I was watching your country in South Africa, and I went out to that famous national park, and there was a huge lion with apparently just been fed or had fed itself. Being a natural park, we drove past it in a car. We drove about this far from it. It was just laying, looking very pleased with itself, and we were tempted to get out of the car, but it's written big notices that you must not get out of your car under any circumstances. So we decided not to take the chance. But anyway, he looked very calm and very satisfied with himself. Once he's literally taken his teref, then you can't stand him up. Now all this is referring to Yehuda. Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda. The scepter of leadership or kingship will never pass away from Yehuda. And the lawgiver will always be literally between his feet. Now that tends to indicate that a kingly person, he used to have like scribes that would stand around him, whenever he decreed anything, then there would be scribes that would write it down for him, and they were called like the lawgivers, Bapoyo, and they would stand around the feet of the king. So therefore, you will always be a leader, and your scribes will always be standing around your feet, mibein raglo, but lo yosu, this will never part from you. Ad ki yove shiloi, until such time that will come a thing or some Indian called shiloi, veloi yikas amin, and to him, to this shiloi, they will gather all the peoples of the world. That's where how Rashi learns it. The Amim means all the peoples of the world. So Lo Yoso Shevet Yehuda tends to indicate that Yehuda is going to be a king, and therefore the scepter of kingship will never turn away from him. He'll always have it in his hands, and therefore he'll always have these lawgivers that stand around under his feet, and they write down all the laws that he's going to give. And this is going to last ad ki yove Shiloh, until there will come this Indian of Shiloh. Rashi says that that's referring to Melech Hamon. Shiloh is a name for Melech HaMashiach. And then lo yikas hamim, that all the peoples will gather to him. The point being, the kingship of Yehuda is limited only to Yidden. And we'll see it refers to David HaMelech and all those who came after him. They were kings only by Yidden. The Chiddush of Moshiach is that he'll be a king over all of the peoples of the world. And therefore, he will be Lo Yosu Shevet Yehuda, means that there'll be a kingship and a kingly scepter in the hands of Yehuda, but that will be all the time in those who are shaykh to Yehuda. In other words, his people, the Jewish people. And the Machayke Bein Raglav, the same thing. There'll be also a lawgiver following his instructions. instructions, till such time that there'll come Moshiach, and then the Chiddush will be that all the peoples of the world will be under his kingship. So comes along Rashi, and Rashi says, Loi Yosu Shevet MeYehuda. So it says Rashi, Midovid ve'elach, that the kingship is not going to leave the tribe of Yehuda from David HaMelech and further. That would tend to indicate that until David HaMelech, there's not necessarily going to be the scepter of kingship in the hands of Yehuda. Now maybe we could suggest the reason why Rashi says that, because the first king of the Yidden, does anybody know who the first king of the Yidden was? Shaul HaMelech. Now Shaul HaMelech, he was from Shevet Binyamin, he was from the sons of Yosef. Now that's got a shaykhus somewhat to kingship, because Yosef, he was told by Yaakov that he's going to be the Emes of Bechor. We just had that earlier in the Parsha. And so the person who's the Bechor, it would naturally follow that he be given the kingship, because he's the leading member of the family, he's the firstborn. So Yosef, his son, Shaul, I mean, he came from Shevet Ephraim, from the sons of Yosef. So Shaul HaMelech, he became the first king. So therefore Rashi's medactic to say that this whole union that the kingship won't pass away from Yehuda, from the tribe of Yehuda, is only from David HaMelech and further. Because David HaMelech, he was Mishevet Yehuda. So then Rashi says, Midavid ve'elach. Elu Roshei Godiyei shebebavel, shereidim es ha'am ve'shevet, hamamunim al pi hamalches. These are the leaders of the Goliaths in Bavel. They smite the people, they oblige the people with a stick, and they go with a shevet, and they are elected according to the kings, meaning the kings of Persia. Because well known that Bavel was under the Persian Empire, and the Persian kings, they elected these people called the Reish Galusa, Roshei Goliaths, that they called in the Gemara the Reish Galusa. And they were in Bavel, and they used to be able to boss people around, Yidden, not Goyim. They used to be able to boss Yidden around, even to the point of forcing them legally or whatever they wanted. They used to get it done, even to the point of forcefully obliging people to keep what they said. So that was the Rosh HaGoliaths in Bavel. And they were elected and they were appointed according to the Persian kings, Al Pi Hamalches. Now that's very interesting that Rashi writes that, and we'll soon see in a second why Rashi says that. But what does he mean that he says that the Shevet won't pass from Yehuda? And he says, Midavid ve'elach, he's talking about the kings. Then all of a sudden Rashi moves in and he says, no, it really means the Roshi Goliath Bavel. These guys, these leaders who were in Bavel. Rashi says, Talmidim. A mechoichek doesn't mean a lawgiver, but a mechoichek means somebody that he learns the Torah. He's a Talmid. He learns faithfully what is taught. Says Rashi, Elu Nasiei Eretz Yisrael. These are the princes who were in Eretz Yisrael. Now you've all heard of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the one who wrote the Mishnayos, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So he's called Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And we find that Hillel HaZokein. Hillel HaZokein, he was Hanasi. And then we find Reverend Gamliel, who was from his son, he was his grandson. He was Nasi. And then the Gemara tells the whole story that there was a problem in the base medrash, and they put Rabbi Gamliel down, and they put Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in his place. He was the Nasi. So that's going to prevent a problem that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah wasn't L'chera from Shevet Yehuda. But we'll soon see about that. Maybe it's not as problematic as it sounds. However, to say that there were these great Chachamim in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, they were called Nasiim. Now they weren't rulers like kings. They weren't princes in the sense that they were kings, but they had a tremendous ruling power also over the people, and it was based around their koyach in teaching and deciding matters in Torah. And there we see that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, what he's called Rabbeinu HaKodesh in the Gemara. The Gemara even gives a reason why he was called Rabbeinu HaKodesh. Doesn't it? Well, nobody showed any interest as to why that is, so maybe we don't have to bother to say it. But they say about the Rebbe Rashab that he was also medactic in exactly the same meaning as it brought down about Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbeinu HaKodesh.
What's he name?
Shalom Aleichem. So it's brought down that he was called Rabbeinu HaKodesh because he never put his hands lower than his belt. He never put his hands underneath his belt. So he stayed in the Gemara. That's why he was called Rabbeinu HaKodesh. So it's written about the Rebbe Rashab that if you watched him, he was tremendously careful. He never let his hands below a certain level, around about his waist height. Yeah. I heard it from several people. Yeah. So that's going to connect maybe with something we'll say at the end of the class, when I get to our Rebbeim, to the Nasi'ei Chabad. However, suffice it to say that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he was the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael, and the thing about the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael was, why do you have to always make a joke out of things? Maybe you'll teach yourself once to be serious about everything we say. You don't have to laugh at every little thing. You understand? It's really part of your education. That's why I take my task to say it. It's not good to be, always looking to make a little joke out of something. You understand? Sometimes you have to take something for the worth that it said and just absorb it and make it weiter. You understand? Don't always have to make shtiklach and jokes out of things. But I'm not just talking to you. Ismera, the Maila of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was that he was a Talmud. That's what Rashi said. In other words, that the great teachers in Eretz Yisrael, they followed on from their teachers, and they said that their whole Maila was that they were receivers from their teachers, and that led them to become the teachers of the whole people. But the fact that they're called Nasi also tends to indicate that they had some sort of ruling power over the people. And therefore we find Rabbeinu HaKodesh, not only was he a great teacher that he wrote all the Mishnayos down, but also had a certain kingship about him. If you study he acted in certain ways like the royal figures at that time in other parts of the world. And therefore it's brought down that he was very friendly with Antoninus, the Roman emperor, and Rabbeinu HaKodesh Rebbe were very friendly, to the point that it seems that Rebbe got him to the point where he wanted, or he would have been Mishkayel, and he wanted to become a Yid with the whole Maisa. When you get to the whole friendship between Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Antoninus. So we see that there's certain places in the Gemara, and even in Tosafos, where they compare Antoninus, and what do you want better than Rashi over there in Parshat Toildes, when Rivka Imenu had the problem with her prior to giving birth to Yaakov and Esau, and she felt that they were wrestling inside the womb, and she went to ask Shem, and Rashi brings down over there, according to one interpretation, the two people inside the womb, they indicated, and they were a preparation for the two great leaders that were going to be from Yaakov and Esau, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Antonina. Rashi brings it over there. So we see that there's a sort of connection that Rabbeinu HaKodesh had a royalty about him that even a person like Antoninus was very taken with the royalty, and if we look carefully, despite the fact that he was the Roman governor and not later became the emperor, nothing to do with, and nonetheless he had a certain bittul, a certain subject type of a self-nullification, legabi ribbing. So for that we see that in Eretz Yisrael there's a combination of Talmidim, that they become Nasigim, and their inyan is to teach Torah. A Talmud is somebody that he's a learner of Torah, and the fact that he's called a Mochokek, he gives law to other people, tend to indicate that he takes that what he learned and he passes it on and teaches it to others. V'hilu b'negeh to the Rosh Goliath in Bavel, or those with the Reish Galusa in Bavel, Rashi says that they were roidim esoam b'shevet. They used to really boss the people around, and they were under the election of the kings of Persia. Now if we look carefully in the Gemara, if you'll notice, wherever the Gemara mentions these people that were called Reish Galusa, and the Reish Galusa wasn't necessarily a great learned man of the standard of the other Chachomim, who were the Chachmei HaTalmud in Bavel. But he was a man of leading personality and a man of standing with the Persian kings, and therefore they elected him, and he decided and he gave forth. But before he gave forth these rulings for all the Jews in Bavel, he used to ask the Chachomim, and he used to take all sorts of advice from the great Chachomim before he gave his ruling. Well, that tends to indicate that the Reish Galusa wasn't necessarily a learned man per se. When I say learned, he certainly wasn't an Amoret, but he wasn't necessarily on the same greatness and stature in learning as what the other great Chachmei HaTalmud in Bavel were. And therefore he even used to take advice from them, and on the contrary, they used to come into him and tell him what they thought was a good idea, that he give rulings. If you look in the Gemara, you'll see it. The only thing is that the Reish Galusa had position, so therefore he had a big household. He would take people in, and the Chachamim would come in, and they would sit around there and verbring, make, I don't know, Chassidish verbringen, so exactly what they did in the house of the Reish Galusa. But people would come in and they would meet there, and it was a whole sort of public, like gathering place for the benefit of Yidden, both Bekashmius Uberuchnian. So therefore, Rashi says that the Ika of this Reish Galusa was that he was Mamuna al Pia Malchus. His whole inyan was that the Persian kings put their authority in him, but again to the Jewish people. Pirush Adova, that they didn't really know what was good for the Jewish people, because they didn't understand all their laws, and they didn't know how to arbitrate for them. However, they took a person who was a leading man. And Rashi says, we're going to see, that Rashi's point is that this leading man, this Reish Galusa, he was a descendant of David. He was a descendant from Shevet Yehuda, and in order to be a Reish Galusa, he had to be a descendant from Mishpachas Hamalucha, by Yidden, Dahainu, David. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean to say that the kings of Persia went around looking at his family tree, to be boided. But the kings in Persia, they said that they will only elect a Reish Galusa when the Yidden tell them who they want to be a Reish Galusa. And who did the Yidden say they want to be a Reish Galusa? They said only somebody from Mishpachas Yehuda, Shevet Yehuda, and in that itself from Mishpachas David HaMelech. And so therefore we see that Rashi is very medactic. The Rashi says, Lo Yosor Shevet mi Yehuda, there's never going to turn away the ruling power from Yehuda. So Rashi says, Mi David Va'elach. He doesn't say all the kings after David. He just said, Mi David, and then Elach further into history. And he said, who is that, for example? Afilu in the Golas, in Bavel. And Afilu when there was no kings anymore by Yidden, but there was a king of Pras. The Malchus means Malchus Pras. The Persian kings, or they would, appoint and they would elect a leader for the Jewish people, Bein V'Gashmis, Bein Baruch Niyach. Well, he didn't have to be a great chacham per se, necessarily, but he had to be a responsible person who had what was clear, the leadership of Malchus and of kingship in him. And he had the ability to be strict and to make sure that Ali Dana Shevet, things got done. For the sake and for the welfare of Yidden. And that's to the schus of the Malchi Pras, that they did it that way. And I say this given. But Rov Hazman, that the whole Indian of the Golas Bovil was Kayam. And the great yeshivas that were in Bovil, they were under this Reish Karusa who had the willing support, as you might call it, of the Malchi Pras. The Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, Rashi stresses, that the Indian of the leadership was also called a Nasi. And a Nasi means almost like a kingly figure, as we saw in Rabbeinu HaKodesh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. But there we see that it's more linked also with the Indian of Talmidim, with Torah and with teaching Torah. And therefore, if I'm not mistaken, in the Yonason, Bein Uzeo, he says, Alfei Oiraisa, that the Mochoikek means teachers of Torah, those who teach and they're Malamdim. And that was very interesting. That I saw in a Sefer, one of the early Meforshim brings down that it's well known that in Eretz Yisrael, the people born in Eretz Yisrael and brought up under the Chachmei HaTorah in Eretz Yisrael were great Malamdim and great teachers. That was very interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about it or if you've ever noticed it. If you're ever in Yerushalayim and you ever go into a cheder or a yeshiva kitana, which is run by Yerushalmis, people that they go back generations into being born in Eretz HaKodesh, then you'll see that they're amazingly capable Malamdim. And it's well known that the Yerushalmis that have been in Jerusalem for generation after generation, they're also tremendously brilliant Malamdim when it comes to teaching. And that goes back to this Rashi. What Rashi says, that there's a koyach in Eretz Yisrael, that the leadership is linked with an ability to teach Torah. And that's the union of what the Yonason ben Uziel says, Alfei Oiraisa. Alright, so that's going to be the case Ad ki yovei Shiloi, until they'll come Shiloi. And Rashi says, who is Shiloi? Melech HaMoshiach. Shiloi is referring to the king Moshiach himself. Sha'amalucha Shiloi. So therefore Rashi Tais is very interesting. The word Shiloi, this line was written Shiloi. In other words, that this whole Shevet is going to be completely his. He's going to be the king, and the whole Indian of Malucha will belong to him. And then all the people of the world, Rashi says, Lo yikas amim, asifas amim, all of them are going to gather around and become botil and listen to the directives of Melech HaMashiach. All the peoples of the world. And therefore the word yikas means to gather together, and all the people is going to become like one huge community that's going to be makabel for Melech HaMashiach. And that's the Chiddush. Ad. This will be the case until, meaning that Yehuda and Shevet Yehuda will always carry the scepter of leadership until, but that will be by Yidden. Rosh Goliath in Baal, they were for the Yidden only. But when it will come Melech HaMoshiach, then the Malchus will spread. Therefore it makes sense to say that, why do you say that Lo Yosu Shevet mi Yehuda, it'll never pass away the leadership and kingship from Yehuda, ad, until such a time? That sounds like as if you're saying up until a certain point. So therefore the point is that therefore Rashi stresses that these are Rosh Goliath, Shebabovel, they were only for the Yidden. And David was also, he was a Melech B'Yerushalayim, Aboyim Shona, and their whole leadership was only for the good of the Yidden. But the Chiddush of Melech HaMashiach is that he'll take over he'll take on the whole of humanity. Take it from Yad Mamish, Omein Kein Yehi, Omein Kein Yehi Rotzen. Because humanity is very fast losing all the traces of humanity. And so everyone who's going to return it is a leader, that he'll be the leader of the whole humanity together. And that's Melech HaMashiach. She's Kaleb Miyad now. Take it from Miyad now. That's a brief glance at see here, the Rashi learns, Lo Yosu Shevet mi Yehuda is like a nevuah on a part of Yaakov Avinu to the tribe of Yehuda, that they're always going to be leaders, even in the time of the Golas. They're going to be leaders. And in Eretz Yisrael, they're going to be leaders in a very special way, through the power of Torah. And then that's going to go up until Moshiach. Once Moshiach comes, their leadership is going to expand tremendously. And therefore the word Ad is a Maila. That's only going to be up until Yovei Shiloi. But once Yovei Shiloi, then it's going to take over the whole world. So we see the Fisher, that according to Rashi, the whole Nevuah that Yaakov Avinu made when it get to Shevet Yehuda, that they would be Midovid, Va'elech, they would be the leaders, kingly leaders of the Jewish people. That's an everlasting statement. It's a Nevuah Nitzchias ad sof kol hadeiros. Amen. It's not shining that Ashinu. You want to say, no, wait a minute, after Tzidkiyahu, after they took the Jewish kings into Golas, then we don't really find it that there were any real kings. Oh yes, there were kings. After that, and we'll soon see, there was another group of kings. But after the Churban Habayis, and there's no more kings by Yidden. So Rashi says there really were kings by Yidden, and they were in Golas, Bavel, and even in the terrible Golas, it was in Eretz Yisrael. The Romans destroyed Rachmanin Islam. Eretz Yisrael, you had Nasiim, you had princes of Torah, that they were also a continuation, as well known, Rabbeinu HaKodesh, he was directly from David HaMelech. Edify. Rashi learns that the whole thing is an everlasting Nevuah on the part of Yaakov Avinu, but again to Shevet Yehuda. Now, why was Yehuda? Why was he Zeicha? Why was he Zeicha that Davke Melucha was given to him? So we feel right from the very beginning, very, very early in the piece, we see that Yehuda always takes a sort of a leading part in everything that goes on. For example, we see that when the Golim had the flags traveled in the desert, then the first one was Yehuda. He started first. He was the leading one. And then even earlier than that, by the whole selling of Yosef Rachmanin Islam, we see that Yehuda, even though he said, let's throw him into one of the pits, he saved Yosef's life, because when Yosef first started approaching all the brothers, then they said, let's go and kill this guy. If you look up in the pasuk, you'll see that L'chuva nahar gehu, let's kill him. And so the only one who said, let's kill him, was Yehuda. And everybody listened, even though everybody prior to that had said that we're gonna kill him and throw his dead body into one of the boiros. Yehuda said, no, let's put his live body into one of into one of the boiros, and everybody listened. In other words, everybody was makabel whatever Yehuda said, and then later Yehuda said, why should we even endanger his life like that? Let's sell him to these guys that we see coming along. Well, nobody questions it. Once Yehuda said, then we see that it all goes. Well, on that basis, some people want to say, and it says much in Rashi, without going into the whole arichas, it appears that because he did that, Yehuda, that's why he had such an aliyah, and why he was zeicha to become a king later. And here Yaakov gives him that, because we see that Yehuda spoke in an authoritative way which saved Yosef's life. The one big mistake that Yehuda made was that he should have said, let's change our mind and take him back to his father. And therefore it's brought down that you must praise what Yehuda said. It's written, the Gemara says, if you praise what Yehuda said, then you're not Beseder. I don't want to say what the Gemara says about it. And here we see that Rashi does praise what Yehuda did. And here we're saying that's one of the reasons why he became a king. So some of the great Meforshim said it depends what way you're coming. If you're coming with the fact that Dafki, because he had that kingly power, he could have saved Yosef somehow or another and taken him back eventually to his father, or that Taki, you're not allowed to praise what Yehuda did. Over on the fact that Yehuda actually saved Yosef's life, and he said put him in the boy, and then later he himself said, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim, or whatever they were. There's a whole difference of opinion whether they were Ishmaelim, Midyanim, who they were. They changed costumes, or they changed action quite a few times. Anyway, that was Yehuda's action. And therefore, we see right from the beginning, it was understood amongst all the brothers that Yehuda was like the instructor. He was like the royal figure that everybody became, like it were, botel to him. And then we see that later in last week's part of the Parshas, prior to that the whole Indian that caused Yosef HaTzadik to actually break down and reveal himself to his brothers was the approach made by Yehuda. Dafki, when Yehuda approached Yosef, Dafki, when he spoke to him, then we see that Yosef, as it were, broke down. He couldn't hold out anymore from his brothers. So we see that all the way through, Yehuda's got this leading power over the other brothers. And if Rashi, as it were, learns that there's something essential in Yehuda, that he is the leader, he has to be the king, and therefore he just is going to be the leading figure amongst Jewish people, ruling figure in different ways on him, but he'll be the leading figure all the way through to Melech HaMashiach. So you might say, well, wait a minute, the Rosh HaGolas in Babel was also only up to a certain point in history, and the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael was only up to a certain point in history. Well, if you have that question, then save it for a few minutes, because we'll get back to that shortly. However, that's Rashi. Comes along the Ramban, and the Ramban learns a different type of shot. And the Ramban, he wants to say that you can't very well say that Yehuda was made the royal figure by Yaakov Avinu for all eternity. He said we find that there have been huge periods in Jewish history when there's been no royal figure. So you can't very well say that when he said Lo Yosur Shevet Mi Yehuda, he was making an avua in time. And he was saying that they will never change, that the rulers will always be Yehuda. What about the times when there's been no rulers? That's the basic kasha of the Ramban. And therefore the Ramban says a very fascinating thing, which a lot of people know about, and they find it a little bit sort of difficult to sort of accept. That's what the Ramban said. And the Ramban says like this. He says when Yaakov Avinu said Lo Yotzu Shevet Mi Yehuda, but they should not pass away the rulingship from Yehuda, he wasn't just making an avua in time, but he was making a statement of what you might call, he was placing a prohibition. And he was saying Lo Yisosur Shevet Lo Yos, Shevet Mi Yehuda is a forbidden thing. You're not allowed to take away the kingship from Yehuda and give it to any other figure, or allow any other figure to have the kingship. Only Yehuda. And if you do, then you're openly going against a Mefurisha will, which was stated by Yaakov Avinu, and you have an issue in Bezin Shumaila with Yaakov Avinu nonetheless. And so he said, where do we see a classical example of this? Chanukah. What's all in it for Chanukah? The Chanukah, the people who brought about the victory at the time of Chanukah were Al Yidei Kohanecha HaKadoshim. The Chashmonaim, they were Kohanim. And they were from Shevet Levi. And they were Kohanim, Kadoshim, and they were holy people, and they were Chasidi Elyoim, and tremendous pious people and holy people, Bali Mesiras Nefesh, in a tremendous way. Everybody admits that. However, the Ramban says that they should not have taken over the kingship. It's well known that after the victory of the Hashmonaim, then Matasyahu, he made one of his sons the king over the Jewish people, and their kingship lasted from that point right through to almost the end of Vayechi, excepting for one of the last kings that was Hurdas. About the time of Hurdas or Russia, as he sort of stopped and he took over, but he was he was like a sort of a continuation of the Hashmonaim, but already in a rather unpleasant way. But the terrible thing is that all those people that became kings from the Hashmonaim, they were all killed. They all got killed in battle with the leftovers from the Greeks in a relatively short period of time. So the Ramban says, how can that possibly happen? These people were mamish tremendously Mesiras Nefesh, pious leaders of the Jewish people, that they brought about one of the greatest spiritual victories that's ever been in the history of the Jewish people. And they preserved Yiddishkeit, they preserved mitzvahs, they preserved the whole Kedusha of Torah and the Jewish people. What happened? Why would they be punished in such a way that they got killed and they died in such terrible way, one after the other? And then Hurdas, he doesn't need your embrace. He's able to get along with that. It's the Indian of Hurdas, that he was actually a Eved. Hurdas was a rather unpleasant sort of a guy. He was not from good stock at all, but somehow or another he claimed that he was from the Hashmonaim. It's all sort of a business without going into all the details about it. So the Hashmonaim, their legacy of the kingship went down into something. He was actually a Eved. He was actually from Goyish, mixed Jewish stock. This Hurdas. And yet he was like a Hemshech for the Hashmonaim. So the Ramban said, how did all that happen? I mean, these people were just such unbelievable, holy people, the Hashmonaim. So he said, because they took over the kingship, and they went against Yaakov Avinu, that he says that the kingship must only belong to Shevet Yehuda. And when he says, Lo Yisosu, Shevet mi Yehuda, he was placing a mitzvah, Yaakov Avinu. He was making like a prohibition that you must never give the kingship to any other peoples. And therefore the fact that they took it away from Shevet Yehuda, then that's what led to their Rahman in Islam, their downfall. Bein begashmius or bein beruchnias, despite the fact that they are kohanecho hakdoshim. And that's a very amazing thesis brought down by the Ramban. And therefore, some people say, I'll smack that Ramban, a more amazing chiddush. And that's the most amazing thing, that we don't find in the Mishnayos there's any such thing called Masechta Chanukah. Megillah, for example, Purim, we find a whole Masechta Megillah. And we find all sorts of, all the other Inyanim in Yiddishkeit, all of them have got their own Masechta. They all have their own Masechta in the Talmud. But we don't find Masechta Chanukah. And the only place you find all the dinim of Chanukah in a few little sugiyas in Masechta Shabbos, but not based on any Mishnayos. The Gemara brings up the whole dinim from Chanukah inside sugiyas in the Gemara, but not in the Mishnah. There's one Mishnah in Bava Kama. But over there, the Mishnah Derech Agav mentions a Ner Chanukah, and you're familiar with the Mishnah over there. But the Mishnah says, what about if a man's walking, going along the street with his camel, and he's got a lot of straw on his camel, and the balabas of a shop happens to have a Ner Chanukah outside on the street, and he's going along, and all of a sudden the Ner Chanukah lights up all the straw, burns up all the straw of this guy who's got the camel. Is he mechuyev? The balabas has to pay. He shouldn't have lit a light out on the street where people walk past. So the Gemara said, if it was a Ner Chanukah potter, if it's a Ner Chanukah, he doesn't have to pay because he did a mitzvah. So he can't be mechayiv to pay because he did a mitzvah. This guy shouldn't have slept by with his straw in such a near way. He should have kept away from the Ner Chanukah. I say it at least an opinion. There's one opinion of that nature in the Mishnah Masechta Bava Kama, but that's the only place in all the Mishnayos where we find the word Ner Chanukah actually mentioned. And just mentioned Derech Agav inside another halacha about a person putting things into the public thoroughfare. if he has to be responsible for damages, what he causes or not. Some people say, great Meforshim. They say, why is it Rabbeinu Yehuda HaKodesh, Rabbi Yehuda Anossi, why didn't he include a special Masechta for Chanukah? So they say, because he was upset, Rabbi Yehuda Anossi, he was from Shevet David, he was from Shevet Yehuda, and he was from Malchus Beis David. He was makpid on the Hashmonaim that they had taken a king not from the house of David, but from the Shevet of Yehuda, and therefore he didn't want to mention them openly in the Mishnah, as he stated in very great Meforshei HaShas. And therefore Rabbeinu Yehuda HaKodesh, he didn't want to make Masechta Chanukah. Masechta Megillah he made, Masechta Chanukah he didn't make, and in all the Mishnayos we don't find. Some people said that it's this year's a Shemitah year. There's a Mishnah in Masechta Shviyas, but it's written over there that certain vegetables are eatable ad Chanukah. Ad Chanukah, the great Meforshim pointed out that that's not referring to Chanukah. It's not referring to the Chag of Chanukah. It's referring to another point in the year that people used to call Ha-Chanukah. Not Chanukah per se. In other words, the Rebbe was very careful not to mention Chanukah anywhere in the Mishnayos, except for that one place in Bava Kama, over there, he mentioned it, what you might say, almost in, like in passing, as it were, because Rabbi Yehuda Anossi was from the house of David, and he was from Shevet Yehuda, and therefore he was makpid that they hadn't mentioned, that they hadn't kept the whole kingship inside the house of David. Anyway, so that's Ramban, a very amazing Ramban, where everybody's eyes jump out when they read the Ramban of Hosea. That's what he says, and therefore he says that the Ramban apparently learns that Lo Yosef Shevet Mi Yehuda, Ad Ki Yovesh Shiloi means another time in Israel. Maybe we can suggest what that might mean. That then they won't pass away the Shevet from Yehuda. But unfortunately, it will pass away, and then it won't come back until the man of Melech HaMashiach. But there's one thing, even when there's no Melech, even wherever, you must never pass rulership by Eden into the hands of another tribe, particularly the kingship, for Shonim. That's how the Ramban learns. So that means that the Ramban would learn, we're not talking about an everlasting thing, we're just talking about certain historical inyonim, Yosef Shevet Mi Yehuda, until such time as Kach, that it will pass away. When's it going to come back? It'll come back Bisman Melech HaMashiach. That's written in the Pesukim. And we find that very, very stressed in the Rashbam. What he was Rashi's Einiko, as for on the Rashbam, he was Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Meir. What Meir was an Eidim of Rashi. He was one of Rashi's son-in-laws. This Rabbeinu Shmuel was his Einiko, Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Meir. So it's a very interesting thing, but without getting involved, he usually backs up his grandfather with great respect. There's one Rashi here in this little passage, one Rashbam, where he brings down what Rashi says, and he said, anybody who learns like that is mistaken. So he gets very sharp with his grandfather. It's one or two places the Rashbam disagrees heavily with Rashi, even though he was his Zayda. Anyway, I can see we have to really produce something very tremendously bomb-like in its massivity to get a smile out of some of you guys. But anyway, whatever. That's what the Rashbam. So he was very heavy with something Rashi says, and he also did what Rashi says about this, but he doesn't get so heavy as what he did a few lines back. And he says like this, and he says that Shiloi is the name of a place. And that's where the Mishkan was, when the Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael, they built the Mishkan in a place called Shiloi. And it's up near Shechem. It's right alongside where Shechem is. You guys ever been to Shechem? No, well, I wouldn't advise you to go there right now if you haven't been there up to that. And I don't think you should go running around like some of these, they should be stark, like these Breslover guys and others. They're always trying to sneak in behind the Rabbi Shasainim, the Rabbi Rotzchim, with the ganze Dus, to try and get at the cave of Vayechi, which is in Shechem. However, Shiloh was a place not far from Shechem, and there a very amazing thing happened in Shiloh, and that was that Shlomo HaMelech, after the completion of his kingship, he had a son who was called Rechavam. Rechavam was supposed to be the king after Shlomo HaMelech, but due to the fact that Shlomo HaMelech, unfortunately, at the end of his reign, there were all sorts of things that happened that the Eibishter was not pleased with at all. I don't want to go into the whole Arichas Hadvarim, because it's written in Siddur, you have to be very careful what you say about these inyanim, and therefore we'll just say there were certain things that were not accepted by Hashem. And there was a great Novi that you may have heard of him. He was called Achia Hashiloni. Have you ever heard of him? That was his name, Achia Hashiloni. Now, why have you heard of Achia Hashiloni? Very nice. Good for you, boy. Exactly what I want to hear. That the Achia Hashiloni, he was a Novi, and he was the one who came and taught the Baal Shem Tov. That the Baal Shem Tov used to learn with Achia Hashiloni. And so that's a whole question. How come he learned with him? Yeah, who went to who? In other words, did the Baal Shem Tov go to Achia Hashiloni, or did Achia Hashiloni come to the Baal Shem Tov? What would you say about that? Very good. Yeah, that's what it appears. So it's interesting that he happens to be connected with this whole thing, because he's also connected with certain inyanim about Malchus Beis David, and all the Rebbeim from Malchus Beis David, but I kind of want to go into that part of it. However, there came along a Novi, Achia Hashiloni, and he said, look here, we're very sorry, but Shlomo HaMelech, his descendants, we're not going to allow them to rule over the Jewish people entirely anymore. And there was a guy called Yerovam ben Nevat. He was a very big up-and-coming personality at that time, and he fled from Shlomo because he knew that Shlomo wasn't very happy with him. And Achia Hashiloni said that he's going to become the king over 10 tribes. You heard of the 10 tribes? He's going to be king over 10 tribes, and 2 tribes are going to be left, and Shlomo's son will be king over the 2 tribes. In other words, that Achia Hashiloni said he didn't want to take away the kingship from David and his descendant altogether, but he's going to leave it partially in the hands of Shlomo's son, Rechavam, but he's going to give the 10 tribes, he's going to give them to a kingship called this Yerovam ben Nevat. So you might say, well, wait a minute, how can you do that? We just learned that the kingship must always remain with David HaMelech, and everybody learns at least at the beginning it had to remain with David HaMelech. And the Rambam writes, and others write, that once David HaMelech got to Malucha, then that's it, ad sof kol hadoros. You can't. Here, a Novi comes along and he says, no, there's going to be another king. So it's a most amazing question that occurs to the mind of the intelligent reader. So if you look over there in the Nach, where this Novi, Achia Hashiloni, where he elects this king, Yerovam ben Nevat, to be the king over the 10 tribes, then you'll see that he says that clearly that he's only doing it for a short time in order to punish the whole family of Shlomo HaMelech, because something went wrong there with Shlomo HaMelech according to the way the Eibishter understood it. And he says that clearly, only for certain days, but not forever. And so therefore, some people say that after 36 years, the kingship should have gone back entirely into the hands of David and his family, in other words, the descendants of Shlomo HaMelech. But the people in the 10 tribes said, oh, here we got a king, and this Yerovam ben Nevat, he was a very powerful guy. He did, unfortunately, a lot of very bad things. And they said, well, let's have kings like this. You know, he's a big ruler, he's very successful, and he got us a lot of money, and the whole matter. So what happened was that the people of the 10 tribes said, no, we'd like to have more kings like this. And so there grew up a whole separate kingship in that part of Israel over the 10 tribes. So comes along certain, the Mephosheh Hanach over there, and they say everybody knows what happened to the 10. Everybody knows what happened to the 10 tribes. So you're helping us out a lot. What happened to the 10 tribes? They disappeared. They disappeared. And Ada Yoma said, we don't know where are the 10 tribes. We don't know where they are. So there's all sorts of tremendous photos, all sorts of tremendous suggestions, and Ada Yoma said people are coming up with new suggestions. Where are the 10 tribes? Who are they? What are they doing? We don't actually have the 10 tribes, and unfortunately we don't even really know where they're to be found. So it comes along the Radaka and some of the other great peoples in the Nach, and they say that was the whole trouble. Achia Hashiloini was a Novi Em, I mean he was from the Nevi'im HaGedolim. He didn't make a king over there in the Shemari, that's called the Shomats here. The whole area where they lived, most of them was in that area with the Rahmanin Islam. That they're saying in a few weeks that they're going to give it to the Arabs. Rahmanin Islam. All of it. But anyway, over there in that area, that's where the 10 tribes live. The 10 tribes, say these great Meforshim, were punished terribly because they held a king over them that wasn't from Yehuda, and he wasn't from Shevet Yehuda. They held a king over them more than what the Novi meant. Is Rahman in the Tlan. That's really heavy going. I mean, that's really powerful going. That because they held another king over them, whatever, boom, they lost the whole show, as you might say. You might say, well, Achia Shileni was different. If you look carefully in the Pesukim, you see that Achia Shileni says carefully that he's only doing it liyomim avaloi lekolayom. That we see that there was a breakage in the Malucha of David HaMelech, albeit not a complete breakage, of a severe breakage. And then the Rashbam learns a very amazing thing, and he says that Lo Yosu Shevet Mi Yehuda Ad Ki Yovi Shiloi, until Achia Shileni will come and go over to Shiloi, and then after that, boom, because the Shevet of kingship was given across also to the Yerovam ben Novan and his descendants, what they call the Malchai Yisrael, and that led to a tremendous split in the Malucha. And therefore you can't say anymore that Lo Yosu Shevet Mi Yehuda. As he learned to Rashbam, even according to them, the whole pasuk is only talking about a limited period of the history of the Jewish people. Ad Ki Yovei Shiloi, until a Novi came into a place called Shiloi, and he made this tremendous change. So according to them, Rahmanin Itzlan is talking about a very difficult period. But we see from that, once again, how unspeakably dangerous, difficult it is to interfere with the fact that Yaakov Avinu said that the Shevet must remain with Yehuda. V'lo Yosu Shevet mi Yehuda. The Rashbam and the Ramban are similar in that they both learned that once that happened, then big difficulties and big troubles hit those who allowed it to happen, depending on which way. And here the unbelievable chiddush is that it happened according to a Novi. It all began, the Pam Rishena, with a Novi Emerson, a Novi Godel, Achia Shaleni nonetheless. And it's a piddly place for Nazar. That what we learn and what we bring from those in Yonim is that Ad Kaman, it's tremendously careful not to interfere with the leadership and the rulership and the kingship of Yidden, that it has to come Dafki from Shevet Yehuda. So therefore we see that that's what Rashi tends to learn, that it's an everlasting thing. Even though he said it's only Midovid ve'elech, but once David HaMelech sat on Kisa Yisrael, you can't ever interfere with that ad Ki Yovei Shiloi, when Melech HaMashiach will come, and then that'll be an everlasting Inyan until the end of all the generations. Slach li, Imloi Patlacha. That's a big cloud. If somebody walks in, all eyes. Nafisa asked herself the question, why didn't Rashi come out, and why did Rashi just say that it's only the Roshi Agole Sheba Bovo and the Nasi our years in Eretz Yisrael, but that was also a limited thing in time. Yet some great proportion know that Rashi is saying, no, that this is indicatory of everlastingness. So it comes along the Abarbanel. There's a very amazing pirush here on this whole passage from the Abarbanel. Now it's well known that the Abarbanel, he was from Shevet Yehuda. The Abarbanel, he was from Shevet Yehuda, and he really takes up here for Malchus Beis David. And just by the way, the Abarbanel wrote a very famous sefer called Yeshua's Mashiachoi. He lived in the latter period of the Rishonim hundreds and hundreds of years ago, mamish of years ago, and he wrote a very Mashiachist sefer, which is called Yeshua's Mashiachoi, which he goes to town because he finds there were certain great authorities that they wanted to say that the belief in Moshiach is not one of the Ikrei Hados. And the Rambam says that it's one of the 13 principles of our faith, and God forbid if you don't hold from those 13 principles, then you don't hold from Yiddishkeit. And they wanted to say that not necessarily was Mashiach one of them. I say, when the Abarbanel heard from that, he sat down, he produced this great work, this thing, where he goes to town at these people and he mummies bombs them from all over in the most amazing way. How could anybody suggest that the Emunah in Bias HaMashiach is not from the Ikrei Hadar? And he says the only person who knew what he was talking about when it came to these inyanim was the Rambam. I say, no, absolutely amazing sefer. The Yeshua's Mashiach. Mamish, you read it, it sounds like, that you read, one of one of the publications of Mishchistim. It's really, there he goes. Yeah, Matisyahu is called Abarbanel. Yep. But he's a Kohen, and the Abarbanel wasn't a Kohen. So that he was definitely not a Kohen. He was from Shevet Yehuda. He wasn't from Shevet Levi. That's a whole problem. We've dealt with that with Matisyahu on previous occasions. Anyway, suffice it to say, that's for sure that he must have some connection with Matisyahu, because he's got the same koch in Mashiach exactly. It's the Abarbanel. Derek, I got greedy because when I was in Tzfas, I made him for bringing in his house. He's got a house in Tzfas. Anyway, suffice it to say, comes along the Abarbanel, and the Abarbanel says the most amazing thing. And he says that the truth of the matter is that if you look in history and you boidik everywhere where Eden have been, all in the Golas, no matter what Golas they were in and where they went and what happened to them, there was always some leading figure that he was like Rabbeinu HaKodesh in Eretz Yisrael, all right, like the Reish Galusa. And he said that these people, he said, if you make a careful bedika, you will find that they were always Meshevet Yehuda. And he said that wherever Yidden went in the Golas, and under what circumstances they should never have been found, but unfortunately they always had leaders. And that's why it's a very fascinating thing that Rashi says here, that leadership was like a form of kingship. It wasn't mamish, but it was. And Rashi's maram is that by the fact that he says that these Reish Galusas in Bavel, they were mamunim by the kings of Persia. That is Rashi. Now if you look in the Gemara, there's a Gemara Masechta Sanhedrin, right early in the Masechta, where the Gemara teaches that same teach in these two Pesukim. And Tosfos learns over there that the greatness of the Reish Galusa, and particularly the Reish Galusa, was that they had power because they came through David HaMelech. But he said the difference is that in Eretz Yisrael they came through the mother's side, and in Bavel they came through the male side, and therefore they were more sort of tough than the ones in that. So very interesting taste of it. That the ones in Bavel had certain powers, but Rashi Rashi writes over there that the whole power of the Reish Galusa was that he was from the koyach of the Persian kings. Rashi writes on the same thing as he writes here. So I have to say that there's something about this Reish Galusa in Babel, that the Goyish kings elected a man that they knew he was from the family of the Jewish king. And they said, you take over the whole running of the Jewish people and you will decide what is good and what is not good. And we'll be out of the picture, but you will look after the whole thing. And Rashi says that they had certain powers in Babel that the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael didn't have. And the reason they had it was because they were backed by the Persian kings. They had a certain power to even take away moment from somebody, or to disown his money and things of that nature, because the Persian kings had that right. They gave that right into the Reish Galusa. And I remember from that we see that there was like a bittul, mesuyam, on the part of the Goyish kings to somebody that they knew was the zera of the kings of Judah. In other words, that they knew he was the zera of Malchus Yehuda, a Shevet Yehuda. And the Abarbanel says that I saw this through the whole of history. And what do we want better? The Abarbanel himself. He was called Don Abarbanel, what that was by the Spaniards or the Italians or something. That was an expression meaning a knighthood, sir, or even higher. In other words, he was a big macher, the Abarbanel, and he was a minister in the government of the Goyish king at that time. He was mamish a big decider in a lot of the things that went on in the kingship of the Goy. And as we find all over the place, the powers behind the throne in many countries were hidden. And they weren't just stump powers, but they were very powerful powers, to the point that the Goyim usually ended up envying them, because the kings would say, oh, you guys look after, we'll just go along, we'll have a nice time and enjoy our royal status, and we'll do all the hunting and all the other baloney that the kings do, and you guys run the place. That's what they said to many of the great Jewish powers behind the throne. Meshach Kol Adira. And the Abarbanel writes exactly that he says that wherever you find Yidden, you always find somebody who was a leader over the Yidden, and he was backed in many cases by the Goyish kings in such a way that he was a leader over the Goyim B'derech Mamela. Avamela, to a certain extent, the whole Indian of all the peoples of the world are gathered around. Melech HaMashiach was already Makuyam Meshach Kol Adayim. It's an amazing Abarbanel. Avamela, he says that the pshat is like, if we want to learn in Rashi, that it's an everlasting statement, that right from the moment Yehuda was born, he was the king. It's just that he got it through certain inyanim, as brought down in Divrei Ayomim, without going into the whole Ariches, and therefore he said right back, wherever you find Yehuda mentioned, he's always the first. He was the first by the Degolim, and we just finished reading the Kriyas HaTorah for Chanukah. He was the first Nasi that offered his korban for the Chanukah HaMizbech, and everybody says, what's Yehuda doing first? Why didn't they make it according to the order of the way the sons were born? And many of the answers are because Yehuda was the melech. He was the koyach of the scepter, of the shevet. And the chiddush of the Abarbanel is that he doesn't have to necessarily be a king. And therefore it's not written Lo Yosu HaMalchus Mi Yehuda. It's written Lo Yosu Shevet. And that's what the Abarbanel says is the point of the machlekes. Or these other people, they say that it all finished at a certain point when Achiyah Shalini, when he elected Yerovam ben Novad, or other pirushim of that nature, or they learned that the word Shevet was referring to Malchus, Mamish, actual kingship. So actual kingship didn't last the whole of history. Rashi doesn't learn. It's not written Lo Yosef Melech Yehuda. It's written Lo Yosef Shevet. The power to rule and the ability to decide things for Yidden in the form of a ruling scepter, that went on through all the generations, and therefore Rashi brings a dogma, the Reish Goliath, and the Indian of in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the Nasi, what the Ik Indian over there was teaching Torah. But you notice it's not written that they are the ones who pashkin Torah. They're the ones who taught Torah. The Gemara says in Masechta Yuma that the ones who paskin Torah are the Bnei Yisachar. Because the Bnei Yisachar, they just sat and learned the whole time, because Zavulun looked after them. And if you just sit the whole time and you got your panasa prepared for you, then you can be a paskiner, you can learn everything down, Mam Shalach Lamaisa. But Yehuda wasn't necessarily the one who paskined. But Yehuda was the one who showed how you have to learn. And part of his whole, and therefore if you look at Rabbi Yehuda Anasi wrote all the Mishnayos, but you don't paskin halachos from the Mishnayos. And Rabbi Yehuda Anasi showed how you have to learn, and how you have to be, but together with that he was a royal figure. He was a leader and a shevet of Malchus, even though he wasn't actually. There was no actual kingship anymore. But Izazman and the Abavanel said that's the way it went. All the Torah, all the generations, there was always a leader, but he wasn't necessarily the Pesach halacha. And he was the one who indicated how Torah should be learned, and what is the kavanah, what is the purpose of the Torah when they get to the Klolosa, Indian of Yidden and Goyim together. And then we'll see that these people, they were leaders by the kings in a way that they also affected the Goyim. The Ababanel himself, with us, Amen. And therefore we find that it went on, even because that the Eibishter never allowed, according to Rashi and the Ababanel, that Yosef Shevet Yehuda, not kingship, but rulership, the ability to hold the rulership. Eventually it's going to become kingship again. Yeah, like he says, when Yahweh Shiloi, what Shiloi is the name for Melech HaMashiach. When Mashiach will come, then it will be kingship as well, Kipshutai. Up until then, it's like kingship, but it's linked together with the union of Mechoikeik. Well, that's the teacher of Torah, not necessarily the Paskiner. The Paskiner was the Bnei Yisachar, and the ones who had the Paskin are the Rabbanim. And the Rebbe begged and shouted that they should Paskin the Mashiach has to come, or the Mashiach has come, v'chule. And out of Yemazeh, unfortunately, a lot of them are keeping quiet. In other words, that those who had to mamish paskin are the Rabbanim. Or the union of Yehuda and the union of Shevet Yehuda is to guide and to show how as they stated in the Gemara of Masechta Yuma. That if we look carefully, we follow all the way through the history, we find that there's always been leaders of the Jewish people, but even because that they decided all the matters for the Jewish people, and oftentimes for Goyim as well, and they also indicated how should be the oven of learning Torah. Well, that's the union of the Rosh Galusa with the union of the Nasi in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore we find that the further it moves down history, we come into the union of the Gilad the Baal Shem Tov. What he learned from Achia Shileni, like we just said, that everything is betachlis unto you. It's not stam that the teacher of the Baal Shem Tov was Achia Shileni. Because the whole union of the Baal Shem Tov was to bring back this whole union, Begolui, the union of the two inyanim of Shevet and Mechoikeik. What Rashi said, that's union from Talmud and Nasi of Torah, and that's the schus of Eretz HaKodesh, of Eretz Yisrael, together with the pure ability to run the lives of the Jewish people, both things together. And that Be'ika was Mekuyim in the Nasi'ei Chabad, because they become called Nasi'im. And it's not usual by the other Hasidus that they call their Rebbe's Nasi. And the whole time, all the years, the Rebbe referred to the Frierdiker Rebbe as der Nasi. I heard it many times. I was there by many Verbringens. The Rebbe, when he referred to the Frierdiker Rebbe, he said der Nasi. In Yiddish that means Kipshuti the Nasi. In other words, what did he mean with that? Because our Rebbeim are the realization of these two inyanim, of Shevet Yehuda and Mechoikeik, Bein Raglav Betachos HaShlemus. They are the union of the two inyanim. Because therefore we find that our Rebbeim were busy with all the necessity. The Mittler Rebbe, what the Mittler Rebbe, everybody says that he didn't even know the difference from one coin to the other. If you showed him a coin, he didn't know what it was, a shilling or a pound or a penny, a chayim kodesh nigavud. And yet nonetheless, the Mittler Rebbe personally busied himself with setting up all sorts of inyanim which gave Yidden parnasa for generations to come. And he also interfered in all sorts of inyanim, which had to do also with the Goyim. And therefore it's an amazing thing. It's brought down by the guy to Yud Kislev. But the Mittler Rebbe had no shachas with him. He was just this unbelievably holy person. He just said hours and hours of siddhas, and because people understood what the heck he was talking about. And he seems to be just completely and utterly in the heavens. When he went on that famous journey, they took him in prison. They took him from Lubavitch over to the city, the leading city, over to Vitebsk. And when on the way, when they were taking him, they went through 3 Goyish villages. All the Goyim came out, Mamish Kulam, Yachid with their leaders, with their Zakanim or wherever they are, and they brought out Lechem Vamela. That was a way of showing great COVID to her. They used to give bread and a bit of salt. That was the way. And it's interesting, I heard from a guy in London, when I was there just now, that he said that was a very old custom by the Goyim throughout Europe, that they wanted to show COVID to somebody, they brought like a lechem and salt. Interesting thing. Anyway, what that's got to do with the price of fish, of the Goyim came out and they met up with the Mittler Rebbe. They brought him these presentations, and here's the Mittler Rebbe going officially under arrest. He's going for all these Goyim, and they're all coming out in hundreds and however many they were, and these villagers presenting him with all these gifts and all this, a sign of a royal person coming into their midst. What is it with? Because it was, even the Goyim knew, Alachas Kamah the Yidden, they knew that a Rebbe like our Rebbe was a royal figure. He was a Nasi and a Reish Kavusi. He was a Millet, and he was Mitam. He had in himself the Malchus, and therefore the Alter Rebbe was very much in favor of the Russian kings, as well known. And he was against Napoleon terribly. Mamish Ad Yisod Bo, and the Alter Rebbe preserved very good relationships with the Tsar. And on the contrary, it was Davki the Tsar and the others, once they became good Tsar, because there was a couple of Mishagoyim in the middle, but it's well known that the Alter Rebbe met one of them in the prison. I think I told you the story. And he caused him to drop his stick, and by looking at him, and he lost the kingship. He died shortly after he took over the kingship. But the good kings, the Alter Rebbe was mamish together with them. And the whole Indian, then they get to Indians there. The same goes through all the Rebbeim. We see that they had 2 big things. They had, on the one hand, they were busy with all sorts of things for the sake of the good of Yidden, and indirectly also for Goyim. And we're teaching Torah, but not paskining halachas, but teaching chassidus and pnimis Torah, showing people the way, indicating what is the derech. That was Inyan of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Nasi Sheberetz Yisrael, or that was his Inyan in Torah, was to indicate how you're going to have to learn Torah in all the generations to come. He wasn't so busy with that, some psach halacha. He had some psach halacha that was given B'nai Yisoscha. That if we go further down in history, we see the Friedrich Rebbe took on the whole Russian government. He saw that the government, the Goyim had gone wrong. It was going in a tremendously destructive way for the whole world. He took on the whole Russian government. A weak little, basically unwell man took on the whole terrible threat of the Soviet regime. And that was the greatness. And when he came to America, if you want to see pictures how the Rebbe came off the ship into America, when he came on that first visit, it's mamish kingly. You can see the way he's walking. It's mamish the figure of a king. It's unbelievable. When he came back later to live in America, in Tovshin, unfortunately he had to be brought in a wheelchair. He was already not well, the Friedrich Rebbe. Oh, the first time he came in Tofreish Tadik, which was about 10 years before, you should see the way he came over. The Gunsahoid of Malchus. And so that all goes down further into the Rebbe. There's a famous Sikha where the Rebbe said the Friedrich Rebbe was Yisod and that he's Malchus. He doesn't say me, but it's clear what he means. That the one who followed the Friedrich Rebbe is Malchus. So the Rebbe is the Indian from Malchus. And therefore we see that there's never been a more kingly figure than the Rebbe in all the Rebbe. And at the same time, the whole yachas that he had to the city was like that of a king. And yet at the same time, there's never been such teaching in Torah like the Rebbe taught us, because the Rebbe didn't pashkin halachas, except in rare cases. But there were many cases where people asked the Rebbe halachas and he referred them to Rabbanim. He said, you must go and ask the Rebbe. I know that I was once there, and my wife asked the Rebbe a very interesting child, and the Rebbe said, you must ask the Rebbe. And that was on many, many occasions, because the Indian of the Rebbe wasn't to pashkin shilas, but to show the derech, and to show the way. What is the emes way that Torah should be understood, and what is the guiding line in Torah? What's going to bring the purpose and the perfection of Torah in the world, and mamela the perfection of the world? There's never been anybody like that in history that was so bothered with the perfection of the world, Dainu Mashiach. And therefore, even the presidents, the Rebbe said to them someday, he said, you name it, we do it. In other words, the Rebbe said, Chinuch, they immediately gave out a thing about, it should be a day of Chinuch. The Rebbe said, the 7 mitzvahs b'nei noach, the president signed on the dotted line. It was and that's the unbelievable thing now, that if only people would say to the president that you must stop the whole thing with Eretz Yisrael, you can't do that to the Holy Land, you're damaging yourself and your own people, I'm sure he would be makabel. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But unfortunately, they all go and bow down to him. They bring him presents and they mitzvah. Bring him a present, gesund terei. They bring him the nicest present you can find in the world. But at the same time, say to him, listen, Mr. President, I'm terribly sorry, but the Rebbe did not hold that that's what should be happening in Eretz Yisrael. I'm sure he would listen. But nobody says a word to him. In other words, that the Rebbe was the leader of the Jewish people as a king. Mamish kipshude. And I saw the other day a picture of the Rebbe walking through someone. I saw it many times myself. But I just hopped with one glance that that's a king walking. You can just see it. It's just so royal. There's something there, that's frightening at the same time as encouraging. And that's what a king. When you see a king, you're supposed to be encouraged, but at the same time, you're supposed to be full with awe. That's the way it is. That's the union of a king. And yet at the same time, the Rebbe was a teacher. He was a machoikek, and he had in himself all the inyanim of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, that he taught the way Torah should be taught, and what should be understood in Torah. What is the way? What is the line that will bring Mamish Melech HaMashiach? That's the pshat of Rashi. The Rashi hints that it's an everlasting thing. It just goes on, and once Mashiach will come and move in a pasha, that it's everlasting. That it's everlasting, the difference will be then that all the peoples will come to listen to Melech HaMashiach. And the truth of the matter is that happened in quite a few places in the world, apart from America, that when people knew that these were directives from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, they wanted to hear, including the Goyim. I feel in as far away as Medina's Australia. And if I'm not mistaken, I feel in South Africa. The Rebbe gradually was shaping and taking over the whole inyan of what's written here, Lo Yosef Shevet Mi Yehuda Mechekek Mi Bein Raglov Ad Yovei Shilo. Ad Yovei Shilo is not ad that then it's going to stop. On the contrary, Rashi just said then it's going to spread out. L'chol ha'am mamish kipshuta. What do we have to do? We have to realize that the only directives that are going to be good for the Jewish people and for the whole world, all the goyim, all the kol ha'amim, is only if we'll do things the Rebbe's way. Only if we'll get out the Rebbe's statement and his hoiros and his instructions. That is what is going to save the world. Otherwise, the world is plummeting. I don't want to say it. I don't want to bring out unpleasant statements, but it's plummeting in a very, very, very negative direction. And unfortunately, even people within our ranks, within Lubavitch, could have a word, and they could put in a word. For some funny reason, they've decided the best thing is to keep quiet. And therefore, we've reached a point now where they're talking about not only giving away the whole of Eretz Yisrael to Goyim, they're talking about letting into the cities where we are, of letting all the Arabs come in. That's going to be part of the new Middle East. The situation is dire to the extreme. And people are just walking around little bubbles, they don't realize what is actually happening. And if The only way is to go what Yankee Avinu said. Yankee Avinu was, because he was way back thousands of years ago, even before Yetzias Mitzrayim. And he said, Lo Yosu Shevet Mi Yehuda, you can't ever take away the rulership from Yehuda, and it's kingship and rulership, and it's in all forms of rulership, even when it won't be a kingship per se, it's emes shevet, it's rulership, even to getting things done to the point of thwacking on the table and getting them done. And emes teaching of Torah, Machoichek Mibein, Raglov, and then it's going to be forever. And like they say, long live King Moshiach forever and ever. Thank you, my gentlemen.